Champions. I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the San Antonio Marriage Initiative, and I am just so delighted today to introduce you to Shaunti Feldhahn. Shaunti is the author or co-author of more than 22 books and other resources. She's a public speaker and an internationally known researcher who has appeared on The Today Show, Family Life, and Focus on the Family. Shaunti is best known for her best-selling For Men Only and For Women Only books. She's also the author of The Kindness Challenge and The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages. Shaunti, you just don't know how happy I am that you're here with us today.
That's really encouraging, Amy. Thank you.
Oh, well, I must confess, back when my husband and I were our young adult boys were small, we found these books in our small group. And they really kind of unlocked the mysteries of what
Aw.
the husband and the wife were thinking, and really were pivotal on our journey. We've been married now almost 27 years. So, yeah,
That's awesome. I'm so grateful to hear that.
I've always been a fan, and they really worked out well with small groups because that's who we're talking today, are our marriage champions who are
Yeah.
interested in what you're doing. So, do you want to kind of start at the beginning and start with where this all came from and your research and how this all came to be?
Yeah. It's sort of hilarious, actually, looking back on all of it and going, wow, I can see how things were set up because, I would not have been able to arrange this. It, the background that I have is quite different from a lot of people who work on relationship stuff because I actually started out on Wall Street. I was an analyst on Wall Street for a number of years, and I had gotten an analytical graduate degree. And then there was this right hand turn where I had no idea that I would be using it in a completely different way. Because this whole thing started after my husband and I moved from New York City, which is obviously where we were working, to Atlanta, and which is where we live now. And I had an opportunity to write a couple of novels, actually. And one of the main characters in the novel was a man. And I realized I didn't know how to put thoughts in his head. Like, it's my main character. I couldn't just say what he was doing,
Yeah.
right? Had to say what he was thinking. And so this whole thing started because I just started asking guys what would they be thinking? Because I just was trying to flesh out the character. And I would say, here's a scene. Tell me what you'd be thinking.
Yeah.
And I found myself honestly shocked
Yeah.
by some of the things that they were saying. And having been married, I think it was 6, 7 years at that point, 8 years maybe, and finding myself like, whoa, wait a minute. And also finding myself kind of taken aback by the fact that what I was hearing from the men, it wasn't just stuff that they thought or they felt occasionally. It was things that they described as being a part of who they were and what they thought every single day, multiple times a day. And of course, I'm going, why have I not ever heard this
Yeah.
before? And that's kind of when the analyst hat went on, honestly. And it's a way too long of a story, but I really feel like God made this amazing way for me to do this massive nationally representative survey of men, across all ages and religious backgrounds and racial backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, to try to get a good nationally representative sample and put it into that book that you just showed. And it became this very unexpected bestseller. It sold over, I think now it's more than 1.5 million copies.
Yeah.
And it's in 26 languages.
Yeah.
And that ended up sort of sparking then the next one, which was the For Men Only. And then people started asking for, hey, could you maybe talk about parents and study kids? And then, oh, could you help us understand, the workplace applications? And then it just started snowballing. And without intending to, I ended up building a kind of an innovative research model to dig out the most high leverage things, the little things that we don't realize matter. So essentially, what I do today is, if you're going to make just a few changes,
Yeah.
this one, what's going to have the biggest impact? So that's what I focus on.
Yeah. Well, and like I'm signed up for your emails, and I don't
Oh,
know,
good.
are they? Oh yeah, are they once a week? Maybe sometimes a
Mhm.
little more if there's something particularly relevant. I think
Yes.
we might have gotten two last week because of Valentine's Day or whatever. But there's always you pick out that one little thing, whether it's from these original books or from your subsequent ones, which of course we're going to talk about too,
Yeah.
that just are that little tweak, that one little thing. I mean, I know just you say light bulb on, and then there were like seven little things, just so little that when you realize
Yeah.
about your husband or he realizes it's about you,
Yeah.
makes such a big difference. Even the way you phrase something.
Well, the issue really is, I think, for the vast majority of couples, and this is whether you're just an average couple or whether you're a marriage champion who wants to help your own marriage or help other people, the vast majority of the issues that we face don't come from the big problems. Now, those happen, right? Like you do have, we've researched plenty of this where you have a spouse who is maybe sexually abused as a child, or somebody is struggling with a addiction of some kind. Those situations do definitely happen, but most of the marriage issues out there aren't caused by those kind of big ticket issues. Usually, you've got a husband and a wife who care about each other. And even if the marriage is a bit distressed, they really care about each other.
Yeah,
And they're trying really hard, and they don't realize, because they don't necessarily know some of these things about their spouse, or they don't necessarily know what works and what doesn't. They're kind of trying hard in the wrong areas,
yeah,
and they're kind of missing each other, and they're not making each other feel cared for in the way that, they think, well, they should after all my hard work, but
yeah,
they just don't realize. And even worse is they're trying really hard and they're hurting each other
yeah,
and making each other feel bad, and they would never want that, never want to cause their spouse pain. And this is like the vast majority of marriages. There are obviously some that are way over on the edge where there's abuse and that kind of thing, but this is the vast majority of kind of normal, average, sometimes in distress, sometimes not, kind of marriages. And what we realized is that if we can equip people with some of these little things, these little light bulb moments where this little change will have a big impact, they can try hard, and suddenly they're trying hard in the right areas. And it's so encouraging because they feel like, oh, I can do this. Like it's not this constant sense of wondering, whether we're going to get there. There's a sense of, oh, hope. I can handle this.
yeah. And I think one of the other big pivotal things you said, and I'm not sure if it was in this book or if it was in one of your subsequent ones, but was just your spouse's heart toward you is good.
Yes. Yes, that was actually part of the research project on the happiest marriages.
Yes.
And we ended up, the book is called The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages. And basically, the premise was, what is it that the happiest couples are doing differently than everybody else? Like, when you have truly, where the husband and wife, and this was the fun part on the survey, where the husband and wife both independently, not knowing what each other was, because these surveys were done in such a way they would never know what the other person said, where they independently and anonymously chose that they were each at the highest end of happiness on their marital satisfaction scale. If they both said that, those are the couples that I wanted to talk to. Like, those are the couples I wanted to find out, what are you doing differently?
Yeah.
And it really, that what you just mentioned was one of the big aha moments, is that these couples choose to believe the best of
Yes.
their spouse's intentions towards them,
Yeah.
even when they're legitimately hurt. Because everybody gets hurt, right? Like, even the best husband and wife can be a jerk sometimes or can hurt each other's feelings. The issue is that when they have that ow, like something has hurt them, the natural tendency that most of us have is to have this subconscious feeling like they knew how that would make me feel and they said it anyway.
Yeah.
And the translation of that is they don't care about me,
Yeah.
right? That's what that translates to. And even though you don't think about it, that's kind of what you're thinking. The happiest couples, they still get hurt. They
Yeah.
still have the ow.
Right.
And they stopped that train of thought. They basically said, no, no, I know that my spouse cares about me.
Yeah.
So there must be another explanation
Yeah.
for this, whatever just happened, or they must not have known how that would make me feel, or whatever. And what we found is that that's not wishful thinking, that is 99.26 something something percent of spouses, even in the really distressed marriages. And the key is, if you want to go from distressed to a happy marriage, one of the keys is you have to let yourself believe that that's how your spouse feels about you.
Yeah. And then you can act. You can, if you don't go to that defensive posture and
Yes.
don't immediately attack or retreat or whatever your thing is, if you're like going, I know there must be something, give yourself just that few seconds to change it
Yes.
and then do some of the things that also make people happy. So let's talk about some of those in this,
Yeah.
because that's another great book that small groups could really, really benefit from.
Yeah. So the happy marriages study, one of the things that we, as I said, we were focused on was, what are the happiest couples doing differently? And this one that we just mentioned about believing the best of their spouse's intentions was kind of the number one. Like, that's the one that honestly is a bit of a prerequisite. It's really hard to have a happy marriage without that. And it's believing the truth, again, not wishful thinking. It's believing the truth of how your spouse feels about you. But then there were 10 or 11 other little habits that we found that the happiest couples are often doing without even knowing that that's what they're doing. And those are sort of mix and match.
Yeah.
That it wasn't that you have to do all of them. It's even a few of them make a difference.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that we saw over and over and over again was that there is a inaccurate belief kind of in our culture, in the air,
Yeah.
that, you know I can change what I do, but I can't change how I feel about something. Like, my feelings just are what they are.
Huh.
And we actually found that the happiest couples had disproven that,
Huh.
because one of the things that they did, which is extremely impactful, is when they were getting annoyed at their spouse, because again, everybody gets annoyed, right? When they're getting annoyed at their spouse, they literally changed their mind in the middle of it. And they started, instead of focusing on the annoyance, which is where their brain would want to go, it would be like a right hand turn, and they would go, oh, but look at these amazing other things that my spouse does. Like, this annoying thing over here is just one among 20. Look at these amazing other things. And they did it almost, some of them kind of did it automatically, it was maybe a temperament thing, but most people, it had become a habit, a
Yeah.
skill that they did.
Yeah.
And that is dramatic, because then it changes your feelings
Yeah.
about this person. And so these actions, when you change your actions and you change your words, you
Yeah.
change your feelings. And so they weren't as annoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example, actually. I don't think Jeff, my husband, would mind me sharing an example, because he shares this whenever we do marriage conferences. But one of the things that was a big issue for us as a couple is that Jeff is a very neat, orderly kind of guy. And I, unfortunately, am not. Like, we're a bit reversed, because oftentimes it's the wife who's getting frustrated that the husband can't keep things neat. I am completely the opposite of that. And it was a thing. Like, it caused some heartache and some issues, because I just, like, I don't see the stacks of mail on the island. I just
I'm
have
on your page. I'm with you there.
okay. I just don't. And it would drive Jeff nuts. And then he told me, and then suddenly things started calming down in that area. And I'm like, what's changed? And he's like, I realized, I came home one day and the kids, the Legos were all over the place, and my mail was stacked on the island, and their dishes in the sink. And he said, I realized, as I stepped on the Lego and I started to go, he's
Oh,
like,
not
I
for
realized, wait a minute, the fact that I have Legos here on the living room floor, that's a sign that I have these two amazing kids to think I'm pretty special. And yeah, the mail is driving me nuts stacked on the island, but that's evidence that I have a wife who loves me and cares about me. And I used to have a nice, neat, tidy little apartment, and I was all alone. And so he started doing that whenever he would get frustrated and go, but yeah, but look at these amazing things about my kids or about my wife. And he said it just radically started to change how he felt. Now, it doesn't absolve me of responsibility, right, to do what I can do to try to be the person that he needs in that area. But the key to the happy marriage piece of this is the willingness to sort of change your train of thought while you're on it.
Yeah, I really, I know I've read it and I really benefited. And in that book too, there was some other research that kind of debunks some other of those myths. I know there's
Yeah.
always that 50% of marriages fail thing that's always bandied about. And that is not the truth, is it?
No, it's not. And so I we released 2 books that were kind of cousin books at almost the same time. This book about the happy marriages, the highly happy marriages, and then one called The Good News About Marriage. And some of that the information was kind of cross-shared. The good news is more for leaders. So if
Hmm.
there's people who are interested in that, I really would recommend taking a look at that because it
Yeah.
has all the statistics and the citations that you need. And our website has some updates because, that book came out a few years ago and there's been some updates since then. But also the Happy Marriages book had more the popular version of that, just a bit of the key data that people,
Yeah.
average couples, would want to know. And the bottom line is that the concept of a 50% divorce rate is a myth.
Yeah.
We've never hit it for society as a whole. We've never even come close to hitting it. And there's all sorts of reasons why, but why we've got this idea in our head. Some demographers from years and years ago had been projecting that we would hit a 50% divorce rate because of some trends in the 1970s. And we've never come close. And I'm still hoping that they're going to revise their projections. But I always tell people, if you see in a newspaper, Professor so and so of university such and such projects a 47% divorce rate, just mentally circle the word projects
Yeah.
because it's a projection and we've never hit it. The Some high risk groups have hit it.
Yeah.
Like if you get married below the age of 20, which is only 4.5% of the population, but if you get married below the age of 20, getting married at a young age is more correlated with having a higher divorce rate. So, yes, that group has a 50%, or I think a little bit more, divorce rate. But for society as a whole, it's probably more like maybe 25%. No one really knows because the statistics aren't kept that way.
Huh.
So that's just an estimate, but it's a whole lot closer. We know that it's more in that ballpark than in the 50% ballpark.
Well, and for couples who are doing something to work on their marriage, or like I know like the one I've heard is if they pray together, it's like almost a 1 in 100. But there's some other places in between there that couples that are actively working on their marriage, it's way lower.
Yes. So I think I'd heard 1 in 10,000. If you pray together. We ended up looking at that, and that is also an urban legend.
Oh, it
Um,
is. Well, good.
yes,
We can
that big sort of one out of every 10,000 couples or whatever. That is also an urban legend. It was not based on anything. But what we did find is that, and this is debunking something that has discouraged tons of people, which is the concept that the rate of divorce is the same in the church. And it is not at all. Because the Barna Group, George Barna, 20 years ago, that was something that came out of the Barna Group. And it was translated in the news and in the Christian kind of world and the average pastor as the rate of divorce is the same in the church. That was kind of the statement. And it wasn't. They weren't studying people in the church. They were studying belief systems. So you call people on the phone and you ask, are you a Christian? Are you Jewish? Are you Muslim? Are you atheist? Those groups had the same divorce rate, but they specifically excluded whether they went to church from the analysis because
Oh,
that wasn't what they were trying to study. And so I partnered with Barna and I bought that data set and we reran all the numbers, but with that factor added in of was the person in church last week?
Yeah.
And that's the key. All the studies, Barna's and everybody else's that has ever been done, and this is, by the way, this is not an exaggeration, this is literal. All the studies that have ever been done on this have found that if you make your faith a part of your life, as measured only by church attendance, and there's all sorts of other things you can measure,
Yeah.
but just the church attendance piece, the divorce rate plummets and it goes down anywhere from 25 to 50% or
Yeah.
more. By the way, a Harvard study just came out a year and a half ago, I think, that found a 57% drop. So that is an example of something you can do that is extremely protective of your marriage. And every demographer in the country knows that. It's just that every pastor doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and for our marriage champions, what
Yes,
what an encouragement
yes.
for them to
What they're
know.
doing matters.
Yes,
Like,
and to be able to share this
yeah.
with their groups and their small groups, and we got pastors on here too that can really. And when they go to your website, which of
Mhm.
course we're going to have all over this, and you can always find us at samarriage.org, of course, and we'll link to Shaunti. They can find that specific statistic, can't they? If they
Yes.
wanted to include it in their sermons or in their opening talk.
Correct. And just so all the pastors listening to this know, you can in general, like now these are all in general, but in general you can say that if you attend church regularly, and some of the studies were twice a month, some of them were once a week, like it sort of depends on how the study was done. But if you attend church regularly, if you make it part of your life, your divorce rate risk drops drastically, and you can say with confidence anywhere from 25 to 50%. And there's some outliers, like I said, like that Harvard study that found 57%. But in general, it's in those two areas. And you can tell them that the George Barna study has just been drastically misunderstood because it wasn't studying people in the church.
I think that is such important information that is probably new news to a lot of our champions here. So this is really important.
Good. I've been trying to get the word out about this. The book came out a couple of years ago, and thankfully it started to spread finally. So now I hear people say, well, the rate of divorce is the same in the church. And then I'll hear somebody else say, actually, that's been debunked.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
No,
yes,
I am so glad we got to that. I am so glad that that came out. That is just, and
it's a
I'm so
big
glad.
deal.
I do want to pivot to one thing because another one of your resources that I have found so impactful personally in my marriage and also just relationships with family members is your kindness challenge.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. It's a book, it's a challenge that you can sign up for online. I know
Yes.
I've done it with my husband and a son. That's
Yes, exactly. The interesting thing about the kindness challenge is this does go far beyond marriage, as you pointed out. And this was the study that we released in 2017, that was our first study that we've ever done that was a before and after. Like trying to do this one thing, and if you're going to do something, what is it that's going to have the biggest impact on your relationship? And for the Kindness Challenge book, we ended up publishing this initiative called the 30-Day Kindness Challenge is like drastically impactful.
yeah.
Like when we were getting the numbers back, it ended up being that 89% of relationships improved, which is like you don't see numbers like that in social science. Like it just that is almost like are my spreadsheets broken? Like 89% of relationships improved. Now it's not 100, but 89 is a big number.
Yeah.
And so the thing that we found that was so crucial about it is that when you're having any kind of a relationship challenge. Now, I should say the 30-day kindness challenge, you can do it just to like take a good marriage and make it even better, right?
Right.
Or a good relationship with someone else and make it better. But it's particularly impactful at helping difficult situations like a colleague that drives you nuts that you have to work with all the time, or your child, like I did it for my 16-year-old daughter, right? Because great kid, but
I think
16.
that's about the age that I did it as well.
My head sometimes wanted to explode. And so you can do it for anybody, but the key is there's these three actions that we found that if you do these little actions every day, it has this massive impact. And the impact isn't because it's changing the relationship, even though it does. The impact comes because it's changing you. And you don't go into it thinking that that's what's going to happen,
Yeah.
but that's the main thing that changes.
Yeah, and it was that again, it's kind of goes back to the secrets of the happy marriages. There's that mindset change of thinking the best,
Yeah.
saying the best, reacting in a positive way. That it's kind of that's a common thread with a lot of your resources, and but it's amazing
Yeah.
because it works.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. We've actually been doing a little bit of initial research now because the project we haven't started it yet. We're not even sure we're going to, but one of the potential next research projects is on mental health and anxiety and depression, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've seen as a thread all the way through a lot of these more recent projects is that we are often our own worst enemy. Like the very thing that we most want, which is to have this thriving marriage, for example, or great relationship with our kids, we don't realize that we're actually the ones putting a lot of the obstacles in the way.
Huh.
And that's not always the case, of course, but it happens enough that if we can just see those and remove some of those, it can allow us the space to be able to build what we're trying to build. And maybe if there are bigger problems, to work on those bigger problems. Like it doesn't solve the big problems, but it makes them easier to solve.
Oh, I love that. Well, you just hinted on your new project, and I know you've been writing something.
Yes, this was a very long project. This research that we just finished, the book is coming out in February of 2023. But it's going to be on intimacy and sex in marriage. And obviously, it's a big issue in marriage, and it's one that we often don't talk about. And so, Jeff is quick to say, this is not a sex manual. Like this is not on technique. This is literally what are some of those obstacles,
Yeah.
right? Like what's maybe preventing us from thriving in
Yeah.
that area, or what can make that area of intimacy better? And wow, yes, we did find some really, really important things.
Oh, well, I am looking forward to that. And you are kind. Was just, I will take you when I can get you because it is
You're kind. Thank
such a
you.
delight to always get to talk to you, and I love it. Now I know the book, another recent book was about thriving about money, and
Yes.
again, it wasn't just like a let's do your budget, but it was talking about how money can also be an obstacle. Do you want to give a quick overview of that real quick?
Yes, it definitely it has nothing to do with budgeting actually, because there's plenty of good resources on money management out there. And so we no need to reinvent the wheel. So what we were specifically focusing on was how to create a great relationship around money, because it is one of those issues that comes up in marriage a lot. And the biggest thing that we found, if you want a summary of the whole book, is that if you're having tension around money or avoiding talking about it, or somebody's kind of playing the martyr,
Or
like,
hiding your Amazon packages?
yeah, or hiding the Amazon packages, whatever it is. It turns out when you have any of these tensions around money, it's not about the money. It turns out it's entirely about how money makes you feel and
Mhm.
how it makes your spouse feel, and all these expectations about how money should work that are running under the surface, and insecurities, and other, just so many things that have nothing to do with dollars and cents. And so as long as you're focusing on the money, you're never going to get to whatever it is that's causing that. And it is really, really simple stuff. So that just be aware that if you're a marriage champion and you're in a small group and one of your couples seems to be at odds on that topic, it is way simpler than you think to get on the same page, because a lot of it is about like helping them understand that they maybe have two different values and they're not valuing what
Yeah.
the other person is valuing, because it just seems so obvious
Yeah.
to person number one that this is the way it should work, and person
Yeah.
number two is just so obvious that it's this other way. And so that happens every day. And so that one thing is something that we've seen, again, little change, big impact.
I love that. Shaunti, you have been so generous with your time. I do want to give a plug for your two fiction books. I am a fiction reader as
Oh,
well. The Veritas Conflict and The Lights of 10th Street. Those were really, I really enjoyed
oh,
your
thanks.
books. So if anyone else is a fiction reader, you get a lot of Shaunti's wisdom in the character. And so sometimes it's easier to learn through a fictional character. I know I like that too.
For me too. Yes.
So thank you so much for being here. We could talk forever, but I know we both have to go. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy.
And for everyone else, Marriage Champions, if you would like to find Shaunti, you can always look for her at samarriage.org.